My name is Elena Vance. I'm 30 years old, and by the time I was 27, I had structured a cross-border merger deal worth $400 million that made the front page of the Wall Street Journal. And my mother's first question when I called her with the news was, "Beta, can you bring Chloe's dry cleaning on your way home?" That is the sentence that lives in my chest like a splinter, not because it was cruel, because it was automatic. There was no pause, no congratulations. Just dry cleaning, $400 million, and I was still the errand girl. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because before the merger, before the mahogany desk, before the moment my sister walked into my corner office, not knowing it was my corner office, there was a Sunday morning in April, 10 years ago, that started with me ironing a white button-down shirt and ended with me losing the one door that could have changed everything. I want you to sit with me in that morning for a moment, because everything that happened after, every late night, every skipped holiday, every deal I closed while eating a sad sandwich alone at my desk, it all traces back to that one Sunday. The interview at Apex Global was scheduled for 10 a.m. Apex Global was not just any firm. In the world of investment banking, Apex was the kind of name that made fresh analysts go quiet with reverence. Their M&A division handled sovereign wealth funds, structured billion-dollar leveraged buyouts, and their junior analyst program was ranked #1 in the country 3 years running. Getting a call back from Apex was like getting a call from God's personal assistant. Getting to the final round, that was the kind of thing you told your grandchildren about. I had been preparing for 6 months. 6 months of mock interviews at 5 in the morning, before my shift at the small accounting firm where I worked. 6 months of memorizing discounted cash flow models, practicing LBO structures on napkins during lunch breaks, reading every Apex Global earnings call, transcript I could find going back 7 years. I had a color-coded binder. I had index cards with valuation formulas taped to my bathroom mirror. I dreamed, genuinely dreamed, about comparable company analysis and EBITDA multiples. The night before the interview, I had laid everything out on my desk like a surgeon preparing instruments. My resume printed on cotton blend paper, a leather portfolio I had saved 3 months for a blue pen. Not black, because I had read somewhere that blue ink reads as more confident on paper. My confirmation email was open on my laptop, the Zoom link highlighted, the dial-in number memorized. I was ready. I was more ready than I had ever been for anything in my life. And while I was ironing that white shirt at 7 in the morning, my parents were in the next room deleting that confirmation email from my laptop. I didn't know that then, of course. I wouldn't know it for another 3 hours. At 7:15, my mother knocked on my door. She was already dressed, pink blouse, her good earrings, the ones she only wore to church or celebrations. She was smiling the way she smiled when she needed something from me, and had already decided I was going to say yes. "Elena, jaldi tayar, ho jao," she said. "Get ready quickly." Chloe's brunch starts at 10. I looked at her over my ironing board. "Mama, I have my final interview at 10. You know this, I told you last week. I told you 3 days ago. I told you yesterday." She waved her hand, that specific hand wave, dismissive, practiced, the hand wave that had been waving away my concerns my entire life. Chloe got her diploma. This is a big day for her. Chloe had gotten her diploma from a 2-year community college program she had enrolled in 4 years ago. She had failed out twice, re-enrolled, and finally finished. I am not saying that to be cruel. I am saying it because my mother used the word big day. And I want you to understand the scale of what was being asked of me to drop, and what I was being asked to drop it for. "Mama, I cannot miss this interview. This is Apex Global. Apex, schmex," she said. She actually said that. "Your sister needs her family today. You can find another interview." She left. I finished ironing my shirt. I sat down at my laptop to pull up my confirmation email and run through my notes one more time. The email was gone. If you have ever felt that specific, stomach-dropping sensation of looking for something that should absolutely be there and finding nothing, you know what happened to my body in that moment. My hands went to the keyboard. I searched. I checked trash. I checked sent. I checked every folder. I went to the Apex Global website and tried to find a general contact number for their HR department. I found a number and called it, and got a voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I tried to find the recruiter's email address. I had it saved in my phone. Except my phone was not where I had left it on my nightstand. My phone was gone. I walked out of my room and into the kitchen, and my father was at the table, reading the newspaper, and he did not look up when I walked in, which told me everything actually, before I even opened my mouth. My father always looked up. He was a looking up kind of man. The fact that he was suddenly very interested in the sports section at 7:45 on a Sunday morning was its own confession. "Baba, where is my phone?" "We are leaving in 30 minutes, he said to the newspaper. "Go get dressed." And that was it. That was the moment. Not dramatic, not loud, no villain's monologue. Just a man reading a newspaper, pretending not to hear his daughter, asking where her phone was. Because he had hidden it so she would not miss his younger daughter's pancake party. I want to stop here for a second. Because I know some of you are thinking, "Elena, why didn't you just use another device? Why didn't you borrow a neighbor's phone? Why didn't you fight harder?" And the answer is that I was 20 years old, and I had spent my entire life being trained to believe that my instincts were selfish. Every time I had ever prioritized myself, every time I had stayed late to study instead of attending a family dinner, every time I had chosen a shift at work over a relative's visit, I had been told that I was cold, that I was self-centered, that I didn't love my family enough. 20 years of that conditioning does something to a person. It makes you hesitate at exactly the wrong moment. It makes you spend 20 minutes looking for your phone instead of running to the neighbor's house. It makes you, at the crucial second, doubt yourself, just enough to lose. I missed the interview by 47 minutes. When I finally borrowed the landline from Mrs. Patterson next door and called the Apex Global Recruitment line, a very polite woman told me that the panel had moved on, and the position had been filled internally. She said she was sorry. She sounded like she meant it. I thanked her and walked back to my house, and my mother was calling from the hallway. "Elena, brunch is getting cold." Drop a comment if you have ever had a moment where someone dismissed your entire future, like it was a minor inconvenience. Because I need to know, I'm not the only one who stood in a hallway, feeling like the floor had turned to water. We went to brunch. I sat at the table at Magnolia Garden Restaurant. They had ordered the Sunday buffet, the $40 per head one. The one my father complained was too expensive whenever I suggested it for my own birthday. And I watched my family celebrate Chloe's diploma with mimosas and eggs Benedict and a balloon that said "Congrats grad" in gold letters. Chloe sat at the head of the table in a yellow sundress, glowing, laughing, accepting congratulations. She did not notice that I was not laughing, or she noticed and did not care. I was never fully sure which it was with Chloe. My mother leaned over at one point and patted my hand. I genuinely thought, she was going to acknowledge what had happened, that some part of her realized the magnitude of what they had done. "You should smile more," she said. "You look like you're at a funeral." That was the last sentence she said to me for 3 years. Because after brunch, I went home, packed 2 suitcases, and I left. Not dramatically. No speech, no slammed doors. I just packed the things that were mine, my binder, my index cards, my leather portfolio, my blue pen, and I walked out. My father was in the living room. I did not say goodbye. Some bridges don't need to be burned. Some bridges, you just stop walking across. Here is what I understood about investment banking at 20 years old. The industry does not wait for you. There is no sympathy for missed interviews, no second chances handed out, because your parents sabotaged you. The door closes and the market moves on, and you either find another door or you build one. I chose to build. I moved into a studio apartment that cost me $600 a month and smelled like old carpet and someone else's cooking. I kept my job at the accounting firm. I started studying for my Series 7 and Series 63 licenses, the gateway certifications for securities trading. At the kitchen table with a lamp, I bought from a garage sale for $2. I passed both on the first attempt. Then I got a job as a junior financial analyst at a small boutique firm called Meridian Capital Partners. Meridian was not Apex Global. Meridian was 11 people in a third-floor office with a coffee machine that broke every other Thursday, and a managing partner named Gerald who wore the same 3 ties on rotation. But Meridian was real, and I was in the room. I want you to understand what those first 2 years looked like from the inside, because it is important for what comes later. Every morning I was at my desk by 6:45. I built financial models from scratch, discounted cash flow analyses, precedent transaction tables, leveraged buyout models, and I built them correctly, which in the world of boutique banking means you are building the Excel infrastructure that the senior bankers present to clients as if they thought of it themselves. I learned to read a balance sheet, the way a doctor reads an X-ray. I learned which numbers lied and which numbers told the truth if you knew where to press. I was not building a career. I was building a case. Not against my family. Not yet. I was just building. Because the alternative was to stop, and stopping was not something I was capable of anymore. The moment my mother waved her hand and said Apex Schmex, that hand wave had become a kind of fuel. I burned it, slowly, every single day. By the time I was 23, I had been promoted to associate. By 24, I was running my own deal pipeline. Small transactions, mid-market acquisitions, nothing that would make the journal, but real transactions with real stakes and real consequences. I had developed a specialty in distressed asset acquisitions, identifying companies that were financially underwater, valuing them correctly when everyone else was panicking, and structuring deals that created value from collapse. It turns out that watching your family destroy something carefully built teaches you a great deal about distressed assets. I understood them viscerally. I knew how to find the real value underneath the damage. Meanwhile, and I know only because mutual contacts mentioned it over the years, not because I was watching. Things at home were not going well. My father's small hardware business, which had been the family's financial backbone, had been struggling for years. Chloe had worked there briefly after her diploma and had managed the inventory so poorly that they had lost 2 of their 3 major supplier contracts. She had then taken a job at a real estate agency, lasted 4 months, and been let go for missing client meetings. Then a marketing firm. Then a retail management position. A pattern was establishing itself. But that was not my concern. My concern was the deal sitting on my desk. A mid-market logistics company in distress, undervalued by 30%, with a real estate portfolio that nobody had noticed was worth more than the operating business itself. I saw it. I structured the acquisition. I presented it to Gerald in his office on a Thursday with the coffee machine broken again. And Gerald looked at my model for a long time and then looked at me and said, "Vance, you are going to be dangerous when you grow up." I was already grown up. I had been grown up since I was 20 years old, standing in a hallway being told to smile more. This is where I want to pause and ask you something directly, because I think about this a lot. Is there someone in your life who treated your potential like background noise? Who looked right at your ambition and saw an inconvenience? Leave their initials in the comments. Just their initials. You don't owe anyone more than that, because here is the truth about those people. They are not evil, most of them. My parents were not evil. They were small. Small in their vision of what I could be. Small in their understanding of what they were taking from small people. People who have never built anything, who have only ever managed what already existed. They cannot conceive of what they destroy when they destroy a person's momentum. They think a missed interview is a missed interview. They do not understand that a missed interview is a missed decade, that the ripple of one deleted email reaches 10 years forward and lands on a mahogany desk in a corner office on the 42nd floor. But it does. It landed exactly there. And that is where Chapter 2 begins. Let me tell you what nobody tells you about starting over at 20 years old with 2 suitcases and a color-coded binder full of financial models nobody has asked for yet. It is quiet. That is the first thing. The studio apartment on Clement Street was so quiet at night that I could hear the couple upstairs arguing about groceries, the man in 4B watching late-night television, the radiator ticking like a clock that couldn't quite commit to a rhythm. I would sit at my kitchen table, which was also my dining table, my desk, and my only flat surface, with my Series 7 study materials spread out under a $2 garage sale lamp, and the quiet would press against the windows like something with weight. I did not cry. I want to be clear about that. I had cried in the car on the way home from Magnolia Garden Restaurant, silently, facing the window so nobody would see. That was the last time, for a long time. Crying requires a belief that someone might notice, and I had stopped believing that what I did instead was work. My alarm was set for 5:15 every morning. By 5:45, I was at the kitchen table with coffee, the cheap kind, the kind that comes in a red can, and tastes like ambition mixed with regret, and my study materials open. I gave myself 2 hours before my shift at the accounting firm. 2 hours of securities law, margin requirements, options theory, regulatory frameworks. The Series 7 examination covers an almost comical range of material for a single test. Equity securities, debt instruments, packaged products, options, retirement accounts, taxation. It is the kind of exam that is designed to make you feel like you know nothing, and then, if you survive it, makes you realize you actually know quite a lot. I passed with a 91. 3 months later, I passed the Series 63, the Uniform Securities Agent State Law examination, with an 88. I remember sitting in the testing center after submitting my answers, looking at the pass notification on the screen, and feeling something that was not quite happiness. It was more like confirmation. Like the universe was saying, yes, this is still real. You are still on the right track. Keep going. I framed neither certificate. I had nowhere to hang them. Meridian Capital Partners hired me 8 weeks after my Series 7 results came in. The offer letter was for $41,000 a year, which in that city, in that apartment felt like a fortune, and was actually just barely enough. Gerald Hutchins, the managing partner, the man with 3 rotating ties, interviewed me himself. He asked me 3 technical questions about LBO modeling, 1 question about how I handled pressure, and 1 question that was not really a question. He slid a printed balance sheet across the desk and said, "Tell me what's wrong with this." I looked at it for 45 seconds. There were 2 errors, a depreciation calculation that didn't reconcile with the fixed asset schedule, and a working capital figure that had been pulled from the wrong period. I pointed to both. Gerald nodded once, slowly, the way people nod when they have already made a decision and are just waiting for confirmation. "Monday," he said, 8 a.m. I was there at 7:15. Here is what working at Meridian actually looked like in those first 18 months, because I think people have a very cinematic idea of investment banking that does not match the physical reality. The physical reality is fluorescent lighting and Excel spreadsheets, and the specific kind of eye strain that comes from staring at cells containing numbers that represent real companies, with real employees and real consequences. It is cold calls and declined meetings and pitch books that took 40 hours to build being ignored in 30 seconds. It is learning to read a room full of executives who have already decided they don't need you and figuring out which sentence will make them reconsider. I built models. I audited models other people had built and found their errors quietly, fixed them, said nothing. I wrote memos. I sat in on client calls and took notes in margins, so small they were practically invisible. I learned every deal Meridian had ever done, their wins, their losses, the 2019 acquisition that almost sank the firm, the 2020 restructuring that saved it. I understood Meridian's institutional memory better than people who had been there a decade, because I had studied it like a text I was going to be tested on. Which I was. Everything is a test. That is the thing they don't write in the brochures. If you have ever been the person in the room who knows the most, but gets credited the least, say something in the comments. Because that was me for 2 solid years, and I need you to know that I see you. The break came in my 2nd year, and it came disguised as a disaster. Meridian had been hired to advise on the potential acquisition of a regional logistics company called Hargrove Transit. Hargrove was bleeding, fuel costs had spiked, 2 of their major contracts had gone to a competitor, and their debt load was structured so badly that they were technically in covenant violation on 3 separate credit agreements. The buyer, a private equity firm out of Chicago, had brought us in to validate their offer price and identify any hidden liability. The senior associate assigned to the deal, a man named Patrick, who had been at Meridian 6 years and wore the comfortable confidence of someone who had never been seriously wrong, built the model. Patrick's model said Hargrove was worth approximately $62 million. The PE firm was offering 68. Patrick's memo said the offer was reasonable, perhaps slightly generous, and recommended proceeding. I had been assigned to support Patrick. My job was to pull comparable transactions, populate the precedent table, and format the final presentation. That was my job. I did my job. And then, because I could not help it, I kept looking at the Hargrove balance sheet after hours, alone at my desk, because something was pulling at me the way a loose thread pulls at a sweater. What I found was this. Hargrove owned 9 distribution facilities across 4 states. These facilities had been on Hargrove's books at their 2011 acquisition cost, a combined value of $22 million. Nobody had updated the real estate valuations in 11 years. I pulled current market comps for commercial distribution facilities in each of those 4 states. I built a separate real estate model. The actual current market value of those 9 facilities was $51 million. Patrick's model had undervalued Hargrove by $29 million. I sat with this information for one day. I thought about the correct thing to do versus the safe thing to do. The safe thing was to format the presentation and say nothing. Patrick had 6 years at the firm. I had 18 months. The math on that seemed obvious. I went to Gerald. I walked into his office at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday, put my real estate analysis on his desk, and stood there while he read it. He read it twice. Then he picked up the phone and called Patrick and told him to come in. The 3 of us sat in that office for 2 hours going through the numbers. Patrick pushed back. Then he stopped pushing back because the numbers did not care about his comfort. Meridian revised their recommendation. The PE firm restructured their offer. The deal closed at $89 million, which was $21 million more than the original price, which meant Meridian's advisory fee was significantly larger than it would have been. Which meant Gerald looked at me differently, starting that Thursday morning. By the end of that year, I was a senior analyst. By year 3, I was an associate. By year 5, Gerald made me vice president, which at a firm of 11 people meant I was running 3 deal pipelines simultaneously and had become, functionally, the person the clients actually wanted to speak to, even when they scheduled calls with Gerald. Gerald knew this. He was a smart man. Smart men who build good firms know when they have found something valuable, and they know that the choice is recognize it formally or watch it walk out the door. At year 7, Gerald called me into his office on a Friday afternoon. He had the good coffee that day. The kind from the Italian place on the corner, not the red can. That was how I knew it was a serious conversation. I'm thinking about succession, he said. I'm 63. My wife wants to go to Portugal. I waited. I want to sell you the firm, he said. Not give it to you. Sell it. Fair market value. Structured buyout over 5 years. But I want it to be yours. I had $37 in my checking account the day I moved into that studio apartment on Clement Street. I want you to remember that number while I tell you what I said next. Send me the financials, I said. I'll have a valuation by Monday. I valued Meridian at $4.2 million. Gerald had been hoping for 4.5. We settled at 4.3, with a seller-financed note covering 60%, payable over 4 years at 4% interest. I put together the remaining 40% through a combination of personal savings. 7 years of living below my means, of choosing the apartment over the wardrobe, of eating the sad sandwich at my desk, and a small business loan from a bank whose loan officer told me, not unkindly, that I was taking on a lot of risk. I know what risk looks like, I told him. I've been studying it for 7 years. The loan was approved. And here is where I need to tell you about Apex Global. Because while I was building Meridian from a firm of 11 into a firm of 34, while I was expanding our deal pipeline into the middle market, while I was hiring analysts and associates and building the infrastructure of something real, Apex Global was quietly, steadily falling apart. The cracks had started before I even bought Meridian. Mr. Harrison, Apex's legendary CEO, had made a series of decisions in the low interest rate environment of the early 20s that looked brilliant at the time and catastrophic in hindsight. He had leveraged the firm's balance sheet to fund an aggressive expansion into emerging market debt, high yield, high risk, the kind of instruments that perform beautifully until they don't. When rates rose, the portfolio bled. When 2 of their anchor clients withdrew mandates in the same quarter, the bleeding became a hemorrhage. By the time I was sitting in Gerald's chair, my chair, technically, since I had completed the buyout, Apex Global's credit rating had been downgraded twice. Their managing directors were leaving. Their Q3 earnings had missed by a margin that caused the financial press to use words like existential. I read those articles at my desk, my mahogany desk, the one I had bought deliberately, the one I had chosen because I remembered what it felt like to stand in Gerald's office, in front of a desk like that, and feel the weight of what I wanted. And I felt something that was not quite satisfaction. It was more like recognition, a distressed asset, my specialty. I called my M&A counsel on a Tuesday morning and said 4 words: pull the Apex financials. What I found in those financials was this: underneath the leverage, underneath the bad emerging market bets, underneath the client exodus. Apex Global still had a functioning advisory practice, a strong brand in 3 specific sectors, and a client relationship infrastructure that would take a competitor a decade to build from scratch. The firm was not worthless. The firm was mismanaged. Those are 2 very different things, and knowing the difference is what I had spent 10 years learning. We structured the acquisition over 9 weeks. It was the most complex deal I had ever run, and I ran it myself. Not because I had to, but because some things you need to do with your own hands. I sat in every negotiation. I reviewed every representation and warranty. I signed the final purchase agreement on a Thursday morning in a conference room on the 42nd floor of a building downtown. And when the ink was dry, I looked out the window at the city below, and I thought about a 20-year-old girl with a color-coded binder and a blue pen and an interview she never got to take. I thought about her for exactly 30 seconds. Then I had my team begin the integration process. There was work to do. There is always work to do. And somewhere across the city, my sister Chloe was polishing her resume, preparing to apply for a job at the firm. She had no idea now had my name on the deed. There is a specific kind of silence that happens in a room when someone realizes they have made a catastrophic miscalculation. I have been in enough boardrooms to know what it sounds like. It sounds like a man clearing his throat and looking at the table. It sounds like the air conditioning suddenly being very audible. It sounds like the moment before someone speaks who does not yet know what to say. I had been waiting 10 years for that silence. But before I could receive it, I had to build the room it would happen in. The Apex Global acquisition closed on a Thursday. By Friday morning, I had already sent the integration memo to my senior team. A 12-page document outlining the first 90 days, the personnel evaluation process, the operational restructuring timeline, and the client communication strategy. My chief of staff, a meticulous woman named Diana who had been with me since the Meridian days, had the memo formatted, distributed, and acknowledged before noon. By Friday afternoon, I was in the Apex offices for the first time as owner. I want to tell you what that felt like, because I think the movies get it wrong. In the movies, there is music. There is a slow walk through glass doors with a briefcase and a knowing smile. In reality, it felt like walking into a building that was holding its breath. The receptionist, a young man named Tyler, who had clearly been briefed that new ownership was arriving, but had not been briefed on what to say, stood up too quickly and knocked his coffee cup with his elbow, barely catching it. "Ms. Vance," he said. "Welcome." I thanked him. I asked him his name. I asked how long he had been with the firm. Small questions, the kind that cost nothing and tell you everything. Because the way a receptionist answers tells you what the culture actually is, underneath the polished surfaces. Tyler had been with Apex 4 years. He answered carefully, like someone used to being observed. That told me something. I took the elevator to the 42nd floor, the executive suite, Mr. Harrison's floor. Richard Harrison was 61 years old and had run Apex Global for 19 years. He was the kind of man who had grown so accustomed to being the most important person in every room that he had stopped noticing he was doing it. The way people stop noticing a habit once it becomes identity. He was silver-haired, precisely dressed, and when I walked into his office that Friday afternoon, he was standing behind his desk rather than sitting, which was a dominance posture. So textbook, I almost smiled. I had met men like Richard Harrison my entire career. I had built models for them, sat in rooms while they spoke over me, watched them take credit for analyses they had not performed. I understood exactly what I was looking at. "Miss Vance," he said. His handshake was firm in the deliberate way that means someone has thought about their handshake. "I want you to know that, despite the circumstances, I believe this transition can be. Mr. Harrison, I said, I've reviewed your personnel file, your compensation structure, and your client portfolio. I'd like you to stay on in an advisory capacity. The terms are in the package Diana sent this morning. I'll need your response by Wednesday. He blinked. Just once, but it was a very informative blink. I sat down in the chair across from his desk. The visitor's chair, the one designed to be slightly lower than the executive chair, a design choice so common and so transparent that I have never once sat in one without being aware of it. And I opened my portfolio, and we began to talk about the business. He recovered quickly. I'll give him that. By the end of the meeting, he was engaged, professional, even collegial. Richard Harrison had not built a 19-year career by failing to adapt. But I had seen that blink, and the blink told me everything about the next several months. The first 30 days of an acquisition are what bankers call the discovery period. You peel back every layer of the business you just bought, and you find out what is real and what was presentation. Every firm looks different from the inside than it looked from the due diligence file. Some firms are better, some are worse. Most are exactly as complicated as human beings are, which is to say, messy, capable, and full of surprises both good and bad. Apex was no exception. What I found in the first 30 days. 3 managing directors, who were exceptional and had been quietly carrying the entire advisory practice, while the C-suite made bad bets on emerging market debt. 1 compliance issue that had been papered over in 2021 and needed to be surfaced and resolved properly. A technology infrastructure that was genuinely excellent. Apex had invested in their data and analytics platform when others hadn't, and it was a real asset. And a junior analyst pool that was talented, underpaid, and badly demoralized. I fixed what could be fixed. I promoted the 3 managing directors. I brought in outside counsel on the compliance matter and resolved it cleanly. I restructured the analyst compensation to market rate, which cost money in the short term and would save money in retention over the next 3 years. I had done the math. There is always math. That is the thing I want you to understand about everything that was happening. Every decision I made was arithmetic. What does this cost? What does this return? What is the risk-adjusted value of this choice? I had been doing that arithmetic my entire career, and I had gotten very good at it. And somewhere along the way, I had started applying it to things beyond deal structures. I had started applying it to people. Have you ever done the math on a relationship? Not cold, not cynically, just honestly. Sat down and added up what you have given and what you have received. Not in money necessarily, but in time, in energy, in the particular kind of attention that costs you something. If you have, leave a comment. Because I think more people do this than admit to it. The arithmetic on my family looked like this. 20 years of being the responsible one. The one who helped pay bills when my father's hardware business had a slow season. The one who drove Chloe to her various activities when my parents were busy. The one who was always available, because I was always treated as though I did not have anywhere more important to be, versus 1 deleted email, 1 hidden phone, 1 brunch I did not want to attend, 1 comment about smiling more. The arithmetic did not balance. It had never balanced. I had simply spent 20 years not doing the math, and here is what I discovered. When I finally ran the numbers, sitting alone in my corner office on a Tuesday evening, with the city lights beginning to appear in the windows below, I was not angry. That surprised me. I had expected anger, had steeled myself for it, the way you steel yourself for a wave you can see coming. But what I found when I actually examined the accounts was something quieter and more final. I found clarity. The clarity felt like this. I did not need anything from them. Not an apology, not an acknowledgement, not a moment of reckoning where my mother looked at me and finally understood what she had taken. I did not need any of that. I had built something real without any of it. And that meant I could not be diminished by its absence. This is the thing about revenge that nobody tells you. The version of it you imagine when you are 20 years old and sitting at a pancake brunch when you should be in a final interview. That version is about pain. About making someone feel what they made you feel. About equivalence. But the real version, the one that actually happens if you do the work, it is not about pain at all. It is about establishment. About being so clearly, so demonstrably, so undeniably yourself that the people who tried to minimize you simply cannot sustain the narrative anymore. It collapses under the weight of evidence. I was the evidence. It was Diana who brought me the application. This was a Wednesday morning, 7 weeks after the acquisition closed. I was reviewing the Q4 staffing plan for the restructured Apex Advisory Division. We were combining 2 teams, eliminating 3 redundant positions, and creating 2 new senior roles. When Diana knocked on my office door with the particular knock she used when she had something she was not sure how to deliver, she put a printed application on my desk, said nothing, just placed it there and waited. The application was for the open junior analyst position in the restructured Apex Advisory Division, entry level. Starting salary $38,000. Required qualifications, bachelor's degree, strong Excel skills, willingness to learn. The kind of position that is a genuine entry point for someone talented, and the correct answer for someone who is not. The name at the top of the application was Chloe Vance. I looked at the application for a long time. Diana stood by the door. The resume was 1 page, which was correct for an entry-level position, so that was fine. The work history was not fine. 4 positions in 6 years, none lasting more than 11 months. A gap of 8 months in 2023 that was listed as freelance consulting, with no supporting detail. A skills section that listed Microsoft Office, social media management, and customer relations, which are 3 phrases that mean 3 different things, and together mean something I have seen on many resumes and learned to read accurately. Chloe had applied for a job at the firm. She destroyed my career to protect me from reaching. The irony of that was so precise, so geometrically perfect, that it almost felt constructed. But it was not constructed. It was just the arithmetic, finally balancing. I asked Diana to pull Chloe's application into the standard screening process. I asked her to schedule the first round interview with HR, just like any other candidate. I told her nothing else. Diana had been with me 7 years. She did not ask any questions. She simply said, understood, and left. Here is what happened in the 2 weeks between Chloe's application arriving and her final interview. I received a phone call from my mother. The first phone call in 3 years, and I knew before I answered what it was about. Because my mother has never been subtle about the relationship between what she wants and when she calls. Elena. Her voice was the same. Somehow I had expected it to sound different after 3 years. Chloe tells me she applied at your company. There are several open positions, I said. The firm is growing. She really needs this, Elena. She has been having a hard time. I thought about the homework model I had built at 20 years old, taped to a bathroom mirror in a studio apartment. I thought about the $2 lamp. I thought about Tyler, the receptionist, standing up too quickly and catching his coffee cup. The process is the same for everyone, I said. She'll hear from HR. Silence. Then, Elena, family is family. And there it was, the sentence. The one that had been used on me my entire life as both shield and weapon. Family is family, which meant your needs are negotiable, and hers are not. Your future is flexible, and her comfort is fixed. You are infrastructure, and she is the building being supported. I had spent 10 years becoming the kind of person who owns buildings. She'll hear from HR, I said again, and ended the call. My father called the next day. He was more direct, which was always his way. He did not ask. He told me, Elena, you need to give your sister a chance. You have the power now. Use it for family. I want to stop here, because I think this is the most important thing I will say in this entire story. He was not wrong that I had the power. He was profoundly wrong about what using it for family meant. Using power for family does not mean using it to excuse incompetence or reward loyalty. That was never extended to you. Using power for family means building something so solid and so real that the people around you are forced to rise to meet it, or revealed, clearly and without cruelty, to be unwilling to do so. I was about to find out which category Chloe fell into. But that was not the breaking point. The breaking point. The moment when I stopped being someone who had been wronged and became simply someone who had won, happened the morning of Chloe's final interview, before she ever walked through the door. I was at my desk at 6:45. My coffee, the good kind now, always the good kind, was in the white ceramic mug Diana had given me when I completed the Meridian buyout, the one with no words on it, just a clean white surface. which I had always understood as a statement about potential. I was reviewing the day's schedule when I saw, in the 8 a.m. slot, candidate final review, junior analyst position, and underneath it, as a note Diana had added, candidate is unaware of ownership structure. Has been told final decision rests with new owner. Excited about the opportunity, I set down my coffee. I looked out the window at the city below, 42 floors down. Early morning light, just beginning to catch the glass faces of the buildings. I thought about a 20-year-old girl ironing a white shirt. I thought about a blue pen chosen, because blue ink reads as more confident. I thought about the hand wave, and I felt for the first time in 10 years, completely and absolutely still. Not satisfied, that is too small a word. Not triumphant, that is too loud, still. The way a calculation feels when every variable has finally resolved, and the answer is clean and correct, and exactly what the math said it would be. I had not planned this. I had not engineered it. The arithmetic had simply run its course, the way arithmetic always does if you give it enough time and refuse to stop counting. My intercom buzzed Diana's voice, "Mrs. Vance, your 8 o'clock is here." I straightened my jacket. I looked once more at the city below. Then I turned to face my office door. "Send her in," I said. The door opened slowly. That is the detail I remember most clearly. Not the expression on her face when she saw me, not the sound she made, not even the moment itself. I remember the door opening slowly, the way doors open when someone on the other side is carrying something. A portfolio, a folder, the particular nervous energy of a person who has rehearsed what they are about to say, and is using the last few seconds before entry to run through it one more time. Chloe had always been beautiful. I want to say that plainly because it is true, and because it matters to the story. She was 26 years old, and she had the kind of face that made people inclined to help her before she had finished asking. Dark hair, my mother's cheekbones, a smile that arrived quickly and looked like sincerity, whether it was or not. She was wearing a navy blazer, new purchased for this, the tags probably cut that morning. And she was holding a leather portfolio that was almost certainly empty, because Chloe had never understood that portfolios require content. She stepped through the door looking down at her folio, straightening it, composing herself. Then she looked up. The professional smile made it approximately 3/4 of the way to completion before it stopped. Her eyes found my face. Then they moved to the nameplate on my desk, then back to my face, then to the room, the corner office, the 42nd floor, the mahogany desk, the view of the city. I had earned one transaction at a time over 10 years of 6:45 mornings. The silence lasted 4 seconds. I have sat in enough negotiation rooms to know that 4 seconds is a very long time. In a live deal, 4 seconds means someone is reconsidering. In this room, it meant my sister was reconsidering everything. "Elena." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "I didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said. "Please, sit down." She sat. I watched her process the room the way you watch. Someone read a document you have already memorized, seeing each detail arrive in sequence. The deal tombstones on the credenza behind me. Those small acrylic monuments investment banks produce to commemorate closed transactions, each one representing months of work and millions of dollars. The organizational chart on the whiteboard to her left, with my name at the top in Diana's precise handwriting. "You own this company," Chloe said. "I acquired it 7 weeks ago," I said. Meridian Capital Partners purchased Apex Global's advisory practice and operating assets. The transaction closed on a Thursday. She looked at the largest tombstone, the one from the Apex acquisition, positioned where the morning light caught it. "Mr. Harrison interviewed me. He said the final decision was mine," I said. "Yes. He reports to me now." Outside, 42 floors below, the city conducted its ordinary Thursday morning entirely without awareness of what was happening in this room. "I found that comforting." "Chloe," I said, "I want to ask you something before we discuss the position. Answer honestly, not strategically. Can you do that?" She nodded. Her hands were very still in her lap. "Why did you apply here specifically?" She opened her mouth, closed it. I watched her discard 2 or 3 answers before finding the true one. "Because I heard Apex was under new management and rebuilding. I thought a rebuilding firm might take a chance on someone with a non-traditional background." Non-traditional. A careful word. one that acknowledged the resume without naming what the resume actually said. That is honest, I said. I appreciate that. If you have ever watched someone trying to hold themselves together in a room they did not expect to walk into, leave a comment. Because I had waited 10 years for this room, and now that we were both in it, I felt nothing dramatic. Just the clean, quiet sensation of arithmetic completing. My parents arrived at 11:15. Diana flagged it. The front desk called to say Arthur and Martha Vance were in the lobby. I told Tyler to send them up. Some conversations need to happen in the right room. This was the right room. They walked in together, the way they had always moved through the world. My father slightly ahead, my mother close behind, a formation so practiced it had become architecture. My father wore his good gray jacket. My mother had her good earrings, the same ones from Chloe's brunch 10 years ago. I noticed. I noted it and let it go. Chloe was still sitting across from my desk. She turned when they entered. I watched my parents take in the scene. Their older daughter behind the mahogany desk, their younger daughter in the visitor's chair, the deal tombstones, the organizational chart with my name at the top. My father's jaw tightened. My mother put her hand briefly over her mouth, then lowered it. Elena. My father's voice was controlled. We came because. Your mother thought. I know why you came, I said. I gestured to the chairs along the side wall. Please sit down. They sat. The room was very quiet. I want to say something to all three of you at once, so there is no version that gets filtered or softened in the retelling. Nobody spoke. 10 years ago, you deleted a confirmation email from my laptop and hid my phone so I would miss the most important interview of my career. You did it for a brunch. I am not going to ask you to explain it, and I am not going to describe how it felt because you are sitting in how it felt. This office, this firm, this desk. This is what that morning cost, not me, you. My mother's eyes were wet. My father looked at the window. I am not saying this to hurt you, I said. I am saying it because for 10 years you told yourselves a story where what you did was a small thing, where the brunch mattered and the interview was replaceable. It was not small. It was a decade. It was everything in this room. Silence. The air conditioning. The city. 42 floors down. My father said very quietly, Elena, I am sorry. 3 words. I had imagined receiving them many times, and none of those versions prepared me for how ordinary they would sound, how human, how insufficient, and, somehow, also enough. I know, I said. Here is what I want you to understand. And I am speaking to you directly now, whoever is watching this. The person who waved their hand at your dreams and kept walking. They are not always a villain. Most of the time, they are simply someone who could not see past the boundary of what they already knew. Small people do not always know they are small. They think they are being practical. They think a missed interview is a minor inconvenience, rather than the first stone dropped into a decade-long river. Small thinking has large consequences. Those consequences compound quietly over years, until one day the person who dismissed you walks into a 42nd floor corner office and finally understands the size of what they could not see. The lesson is not that hard work gets revenge. The lesson is that hard work gets you free. Free from needing their approval. Free from waiting for acknowledgement that may never come in the shape you imagined. Free to make every decision from solid ground instead of from the hollow place where their validation used to be. That freedom is worth more than any moment of reckoning. The reckoning is only the receipt. Proof of work completed long before they walked through the door. I offered Chloe the position, junior analyst, $38,000, same terms as any other candidate. No preferential treatment. No punitive treatment. Just the work, the feedback, and the opportunity to become something real if she was willing to do what real required. She accepted. She started on a Monday. By her 3rd week, she was staying late. Not because anyone required it, but because she had found, for perhaps the first time, something she actually wanted to get right. I watched from a distance, the way you watch weather change, not intervening, just observing. Letting the process do what it does when people stop running from it. This story did not end with a perfect family reunion. Some damage is structural. It changes the shape of a thing permanently, and the work is not to restore the original shape, but to understand the new one honestly. My parents and I have dinner twice a year. It is careful and occasionally almost warm. Chloe and I have a professional relationship that contains around its edges the beginning of something that might one day become what we could have been. It is not the family I wanted at 20 years old. It is the family the arithmetic produced. And arithmetic does not give you what you wanted. Sometimes it gives you what is true instead. True, in the end, turns out to be more useful than wanted. I still have the blue pen, the one I chose for the Apex interview, because I had read that blue ink reads as more confident. It sits in the top drawer of my mahogany desk, underneath everything else untouched. I have never used it. I keep it because it is honest, because it tells the truth about where I came from, what I carried, and what I refused to put down. Even at 20 years old, with 2 suitcases, and the worst morning of my life still fresh, I refused to stop counting. The math balanced. If this story reached you, if you recognized yourself in those early mornings, those quiet years, that long patient work before anyone was watching, then Shadow Drama Stories is made for you. Subscribe right now and hit the notification bell, because every week we bring you stories of people who kept counting when the numbers were not yet in their favor. People who let the arithmetic complete. Leave a comment. Are you still in the building phase, or has your math already balanced? We read every single one. Share this with someone who needs it today. You know who that person is. The math is patient. Keep counting.